Hello and welcome to Candle Blue. Now this is a wax series on developing social skills, and today we are taking up on the content of the letter G, which is probably our seventh theme. And as we talk about social skills, one of the most prominent social skills we need is positive attitude. As always, what we've done in Sky Education, we've taken up different concepts, different unrelated topics, and then added an element of surprise. Students look at positive attitude not as a preachy lecture, but something that they can learn from others. So in our G1 and along with that G2, we've taken up a case study of a camel. So this is a real story of how camels have originated. Before even you do that, I recommend you to bring a camel to your classroom. Now, of course, that's difficult. So what you can do is play a TED talk, which is the reference is given on the origin of camels. It's a brilliant TED talk, and beautiful part is the surprise of actually a camel coming to a TED stage, where it is said the camels actually originated not from Saudi Arabia or the Gulf deserts, but also possibly from the icy North Canada. So we've taken the entire case study. Said camels, what do they love? They love deserts, isn't it? They are called the ship of the desert. So what we would love to do is imagine if this camel, and let's name a camel Kamal. So Kamal, she loves the desert and she is amazingly adapted to it, but the zoologist decides to bring this camel of a Kamal to Canada. So now Canada is not Arabia. It's freezing cold, the winds are chilly, winter is coming, Jon Snow is around, yet the camel decides to be very, very positive. She made some new friends, she begins a new life. How do you think would this camel use her body in this new climate of Canada? Now this is an amazing case study where we just give you the whole plot of it, but now what are you expected to do? So number one, what we'll do is we'll divide the class and ask them to research on what camels or what kind of camels are available, found in the world. And you will understand there are two kinds of camels, the bacterian camel and the dromedary camel. They're a difficult way to understand, but easy. Remember, D has just one big circle. So dromedary is a one hump camel, and the bacterian camel with the two humps in B, remember those are the bacterian cold camels. So the camels are found even in Mongolia. Camels are found across the Gobi desert in Mongolia, and this is the entire idea that there are camels which are also for harsh conditions, not necessarily hot conditions. So the camel could very well stay in a cold desert as well as a hot desert. So it's interesting to find about these two camels. Then what did this camel do? So you can talk about G2 could be a case study where you speak about what makes camels so adaptable to the harsh condition, be it the cold winters or hot summers. And there are a lot of things in a camel. You can begin with ask students, what do camels have in the hump? And of course it's not water. So you find them if they say water, it's fat. Camels store fat in it, and the fat is like the belly most of us have. The lesser the camel's fat decreases, the hump comes down. Number two, look at the camel's eyelashes. The camel's eyelashes are long so that when the wind blows, it protects the eyes. Not only is the eyelash long, camel have double eyelids. So it can close one eyelid and yet another eyelid is open and it can still walk through. Camel's feet are meant to be, like a cushion on the sand or on the snow. It can walk that long. Camel can store, of course, food with it, so it can hibernate internally and go without food and water for days on. Camel's body is made of fur which can resist the icy climate or the hot weathers. Camel can eat at one go, which is amazing. So you would love to do research on this amazing ship of the desert, and we say it's not only the ship of the desert, perhaps ship of the cold icy deserts too. So this is what we're talking about. Now, what is the end result of it? What do I want to achieve from it? And the key word is resilience. You see, there would be time when you would go to a new city, a new place, a hostel perhaps, some place which is unfamiliar to it, some place which is uncomfortable to it. You must be resilient enough. To have a positive attitude is like being a camel. And it's such an amazing creature. You would find camel, putting a head down and just going across the work. Oh, by the way, camels have great attitudes, and Arabs, they have 1,000 names for the camel. So you can do a little lexonomy, a little etymology where the word camel come from, and the lexicography can come in. The Arabic words for camel, which is interesting to know. So there is a word kamal, which is the origin of the word camel in English. That's an Arabic word. There is also naqat, which is a female pregnant camel. There are a lot of words. So you can find out these words, and I'll put them on all the subnotes and footprints for you to find out what did the Arabs call. Why did the Arabs have so many names for it? Of course, when you need an animal the most or thing most, you call them by different names, or when you like something. For example, go and ask them, how many names do your parents call you? So Chonu, Monu, my dear, lovely, princess, Rapunzel. Oh, there could be hundreds of names. The same way, the Arabs are so dependent on the camel. The relationship with the camel goes to the Bedouin days when they live in as a nomadic tribe. So they love this animal, and that's how the name comes in. You have done so much around a camel itself. Really, why not draw a camel as we did in the last exercise? Draw an elephant. Another easy draw that we've got, and we would love you to go around and find out a little more about this huge, gentle beast with a great attitude. Let's move on to our next section on positive attitude, and here we take up G3 to G5. In these 3 pages, we are actually telling a story. So this entire thing is a gem for naturalist learner. After the camel, we have a hippo and the tortoise story. Again, it's a real story. Perhaps you can begin with saying, what are the only tortoise story you know? And it's the hare and the tortoise, and where the tortoise shows a lot of character and a lot of, again, grit on not giving up. This one, for the fact, is a real story. A hippo formed a friendship with a 130-year-old tortoise. The hippo was named Owen in real story in Kenya when Owen lost her mother, the mummy hippopotamus, in the Kenyan floods. She was adopted, strange, by the grand old grandmother tortoise who knew how to raise a kid. So now such bonds are so rare, and this is amazing about a story of a huge giant of an animal, the hippo, with a tortoise. Of course, the entire story that you read around, you can talk about, we had talked about symbiotic relationship in the earlier book. This is an unlikely symbiotic relationship. So we will talk about new tangents as you always do. My first tangent would be about the hippo in general. I know this is too much of nature, but I feel your kids will talk about hippo. Hippo's origin is, it's called a river horse. It was the fastest running animal under the water, isn't it? Hippo, by the way, could be both omnivores, so they're mostly vegetarian, but yes, they eat anything they find in the way. You've seen hippos also gargle and eat deers, but they've also protected antelopes from lions, and stranger things have happened in nature. Kruger National Park, if you look at the video of that park sanctuary here, amazing things have happened around with lions and bisons and how they come up. That's now point 1. Point 2 is on adoption itself. Now this is a very sensitive topic, but I think our kids are grown up and mature enough, and they've seen enough that why would you want to adopt? You can start with the concept of adopting a stray animal. There are stray cats all around the place. The cats litter are huge. How about adopting one animal each? Or a stray dog or something. And perhaps you can talk an entire thing about what it does. They share our planet, how much we should, have concern and empathy for them. Number 1. Number 2, adoption in general. So one of my favorite examples are the popular movie actors Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. They call what is it, Brad Angelina? So Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, though they're separated now, they've got 6 adopted kids along with the 2 biological kids they have. And the kids are from different ethnicities, different races. So there's a black Negro kid, there's a Chinese kid, there's an Indian kid in there, and all of them are growing up. Max, Maddox, these are the names of the kids. Why don't you find a little bit about these kids from Brad and Angelina and say they're an example? Even in our own, in a nation, there are some actresses who have adopted kids, but there is a lady, an old grandmother like the tortoise here, who has adopted kids from streets, and she's got over 1,000 kids in her own small, she calls it home, an orphanage perhaps, But that's an amazing concept. So why don't you take up the adoption thing? There is a lovely movie called The Lion, which is Dev Patel's movie, where the whole story of adoption is taken very well. It's an Oscar winner movie where the kid was adopted from India, went to Australia, then came back to India searching for his biological parents, and then went back. It's a lovely story. You can do a little case study on that. And this is the whole idea, that positive attitude is, you just be thankful you have parents of your own. If you don't have parents, your guardians are there. Just be happy is what we want our kids to do. On G4 and G5, it's just a nice story. We would love to do a storytelling because we have not done the story here. It's a ridiculous story. It's just a funny story. It's a make-believe story. But about the elephant, the hippopotamus, and the tortoise, and how does the story end? The tortoise, how does it run away in a tug-of-war match? You can give a title story. G4 has a lot of questions to it. Guess the age of the tortoise, gets the name of the hippo, give a new name to it. Give me some more similar likely friendships, say, with a lion and a zebra and a hedgehog. A kind of example that you can use and ask a class. I never encourage you to do a story read aloud. So you ask a child to stand up and read. That's very, very, a child feels very judgmental. So what you can do is you can have a class read session where one child reads to the other and the other reads back on a paragraph thing. So that's possible, and that's what I encourage you to do in my section on the second activity on positive attitude. The last activity on positive attitude, thankfully there are no animals here, so all those non-naturalist learner can have a sigh of relief. G6 and G7 talks about a New Year planner. Every time a new year comes in, we have a positive attitude, we look forward to it, we make resolutions on New Year. Most of us who do not keep it, it is a strange fact that the gym membership in the new year goes high. People all want to lose weight when New Year starts, and then the whole thing goes up. So we said that, imagine, I would be very happy if it's around the new year, but irrespective, why don't you ask your kids to make a New Year resolution planner? Or it could be a summer vacation planner. So on G6, it's a New Year planner, where we said that why don't you add the special events on your New Year? First of all, let's talk about birthdays. First start with your parents' birthdays. Maybe yours come in later. Their anniversary comes in. Special events. Festivals can come in. Things like your national days can come in. And then what do you plan to do around it? Once you've done that, I would love them to make a New Year resolution, a fire resolution. So what could be 5 things you would want to do? And a good way to understand is, one thing could be for the family, one thing could be for self-studies. So if I use the word fishes. So family, intellect. S is for my social circle, so my friends around, what can I do for them? Maybe a vacation, maybe a Imagica, maybe a movie, whatever you like to. And then as for health, a very important resolution you add to it is, I want my health to it. So E for economic, how much I want to save, what pocket money I want to have, what I want to buy. And then FAISHES, again as a spiritual one, how much I would like to meditate, maybe go around and do some internal planning. This is how you plan your New Year resolution. Then on G7, I've got something called a summer vacation planning, because most of us have sometimes avoided how to plan our summers. So they go on just with mindless classes, having no idea, waste our time. Why don't you ask kids to plan their summers? Perhaps you can say, read one book this summer, just one, but make sure you finish that book. It could be the great Hobbit series, or it could be the Harry Potter you started, it could be the Roald Dahl you want to, or the Charlotte's Factory, anything, but something that you look forward to. Visit one relative of yours outside your city. Make plans. Ask your parents to book your tickets. Maybe go with your cousins. Something that's fun. Join a course, a nature club, a book club, environmental friendly thing, a stray dogs one. Something that makes your summer very, very successful. Be a part of a charity, a NGO. Do a little social work that you can. So what you do is you use your summers, besides the questions I've given you, and make your summers very, very meaningful. Summers that can become really, really, something that you actually remember. You know what you did last summer. And then look at the data given and make your observation. So there is a small data given, the months that the summers are there, and why do you think summer is the most preferred month for most? Perhaps it's hottest. Look at the size of the sun. Would the summer changes, say, if you were to live in Australia? Because it's strange enough, while you and I only think of Christmas with Santa Claus and reindeers on a sledge and summer, and it's all winter, Australians' Christmas are always in summer. So the difference between the hemisphere, the northern and the southern hemisphere. How would the summers change in the southern hemisphere? A little bit of geography. Why don't you make a globe? Why don't you do an equator? Why don't you add the two, the Tropic of Cancer and the Capricorn, and ask students, where do their countries stand in? Where is India in terms of Cancer and Capricorn? Where is it? Is it the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere? Where is Australia? Where is the tropics? Why are the areas near the equator very hot? A lot of geography. Do a nice big globe here with the lines I said. Of course, these are imaginary lines, but they're very useful lines, and you could do an entire summary of the world around. So that's all for social skills. Develop great positive attitude, and hopefully you enjoy this entire exercise. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Candle Blue. We are on theme core living values, number H. So we have gone H as well, and let's take H for happiness. So one of the core living values we see around is people have to be happy in their lives, happy mentally, happy physically. There's a lot that goes beyond just the stress that we see. One of the life skills that we have in the 10 life skills we promote is coping with stress. And today stress is one of such a big killers. Even it has reached schools and levels that are high, from the best of the institutes like Ivy League colleges and IITs to our primary schools. So let's take up the first of the two H activity, first of three activity, H1 and H2. So we have a small, concept where we say, who could be the happiest person on earth? Now this is something amazing. Of course, you see a huge picture of Dalai Lama, who is often referred to as the happiest person on earth. So before we go to Dalai Lama, let's look at happiness in their own lives. So imagine you start with one small parallel activity where you say, draw a smiley face. And say the face should be according to your mood. So if you're happy, draw a big smiley face. If you're unhappy, draw a smaller one. And in the class, you compare. Doesn't matter what they have. Perhaps you can do it on a class board, one by one. They come in and they keep drawing a smiley face, and they can draw over it, they can draw under it, they can draw inside it. You will suddenly know what is the HQ of the class, the happiness quotient of the class. So imagine you tell the class that, look, I'm going to make an average of it, and in the average I'm going to give, so the biggest ones will get 3 pointers, the smallest one will get 1 pointer, very small one I'll probably give -2 pointers, and then average it out and see what is the HQ of the class. It's a small exercise you do where you tell them that your happiness is in your hands. No one is going to come and tell you a joke to be happy. That's not actually happy. That's comedy. What we want you to do is internally look forward to the day, enjoy the sunshine, enjoy the plants, enjoy the breathing itself. Be conscious of just breathing in and breathing out. Of course, we are doing a lot of today meditation, contemplation, reflection talks a lot about happiness. So you do an entire talk about happiness. Then you say, tell me the name of 3 happiest people around you. And I would not be amazed if they start only with their parents. They could start with a pet dog. It's absolutely okay. So we say that look at people around. Are teachers happy? Perhaps they're stressed, and that's exactly what Sky Education wants to do. We would like you all to, if you're a teacher and you're teaching, we say just bring joy to your classrooms. Number 2 is what we do parallelly is talk about a great case study of a little girl called Anne Frank. Anne Frank and Viktor Franklin. Viktor Franklin is the author of this, one of the most famous book called Man's Search for Meaning. Now, this book is about his life in the concentration camp, the Auschwitz camp that the Germans had. And when these people from Poland were put into the concentration camp and almost they were led to die, he said, one thing they cannot take away from me is my self-esteem, is my internal joy. So talk about these 2 case studies and say, is your life worse than theirs? Of course not. So what makes you grim? The third one we come to this person, the Dalai Lama. And we say that he's often referred to as someone who's always happy, smiling. Does it really make him like his life is of luxury? No. He lives in a small nation of Tibet, which is always in the news because of China and the conflict it has with them. China doesn't recognize his authority. The Lama is supposed to be the highest authority in Zen Buddhism. but China has their own version of the Lama. It's like, there are two popes in the world. So yet he has death threats, and then still he's a Nobel Prize, Peace Prize winner. So why don't you start doing a short bio on Dalai Lama? There is an excellent TED talk that Dalai Lama has given, or one of the other versions of the talk. So why don't you use that conversation and start talking about him? Yes, play the video and show how is he smiling, what makes his smile so infectious, and we've got some questions for you to answer on H2. Now these questions are simple questions because people equate happiness with material things. So does he have expensive shoes which you can't see? Perhaps in the video you can. What kind of dress is he wearing? Does suit and a tie and a business always makes you happy? Does he own a big car? What he must be doing? How about his family? Oh, Dalai Lama is happy because he wants to be happy. He's choosing the way for his life, and that is what is making the difference in his entire concept. So you can do a fictitious, the last activity besides this, the fourth one now would be a fictitious interview with the Dalai Lama. I'll be so amazed if you can get a robe, the red robe that he has, and the tinted glasses, and then somebody becomes the Lama and you interview him. And of course it will be fun, students will not always be serious about it, but if you can create a little laughter, we are spreading happiness in our classrooms. This takes us to a very, very small second activity, which is H3. Now, of course, H3 is an activity which is all about this picture. So it says that observe the picture, and I'll directly jump into the activity because it's jumping into the pool, and it's so comforting to see three kids looking at amazingly, it's a small stream there, perhaps not too deep. There are all the cattle around them, and they're jumping and splashing and enjoying the waters. Oh, the joys of unbounded happiness in your childhood, when you're not worried about anything else, when you're not worried about infections, when you're not worried about any kind of a work to be done, you just want to do. Children do not have proper swimming suit, they don't have goggles, the pool may not be so healthy to swim in. Does it really make a difference? So what we're saying is happiness is to find joys in little things. Now this might be a little philosophical and nostalgical perspective for you and me, but for kids you'll have to take up at least an exercise around it. So after you do the picture speak, you can do a picture description. They can come and explain what they see in the picture. Would they like to be in this position? Have they been in such position? When is the last time they went for swimming? Because one of the best activities that I enjoy, and I've mentioned that before, is swimming, because that's the one gadget-free sports you can involve in. I don't know when you have underwater photography, underwater earphones, but as of now the best thing is there are no mobiles there. You can't go and just listen to music, you can't play a game while swimming. So it is one activity, you're completely in tune with water. And if you're doing it at a stream or somewhere else, oh well, it's nature then. So we talk about that, and we speak about other activities where gadgets have taken over. So your second thing on a case study is talk about things where you still are cycling but you have earphones on. You still are exercising on a treadmill, but then something else is you're always on the phone, you're talking to somebody, you're driving and speaking. How dangerous could that be? That's one part of it. Number two, I would like your kids to go around and find out 10 pictures, so make them into a class activity. Give them some laptops. If you can go to a computer room, brilliant. If you can't, allow them, and I hope you're listening to these activities before that, so allow them to come to the classes with tabs or mobile phones, and hopefully with internet in them, or at least one computer with internet, and allow them to do one by one. They must find 10 pictures collectively as a class where they can explain that this is a happiness picture. I wouldn't be surprised if pictures can be toys, cars, could be gadgets, could be donuts, could be a picnic, could be nature, could be people, could be home, could be vacations. I would be amazed. I would like you to tabulate this. So you see, a lot of children might come and say material things is happiness. Now, that's a strange part of it. A lot of children may come and say, no, that's not my joy of happiness. My joy of happiness is nature. Please tabulate, share your results. We will get the psychology of these children. So this is your second exercise I like to do, that you tabulate 10 pictures your class agrees on as sources of happiness. From the pictures, the third one you would like to do, and of course these are add-ons to what we're doing, is a very nice game that we do on needs and desires, or needs and wants. What we say is sometimes, there is something that you want which is not your need. It could be an upgraded car. It could be an air-conditioned classroom. Well, If it's really hot summer, ACs are probably, needs, but most of them it's want. Your desires are want. The extra cake piece is a want. I don't want it, but it's there, I'm going to have it. So what you can do is make an entire chart of needs and wants, and you can do an entire brainstorming exercise on what are the needs and what are the wants. Perhaps that would be wonderful, and we would love to have you talk a little more about it. The third activity, which is wonderfully shifting from a lot of nature and people to, we are going on to nations and geography, is the concept of the happiest nations in the world. So you see, there was a survey done, and in the survey we had a list of 20 happy nations in the world. Wow. Now you see, the list starts with Norway, Denmark, Iceland, Switzerland, Finland, Netherlands, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Sweden. It goes on. The first Asian country that comes in is at number 11, Israel. The first South American country that comes in, on American as a continent comes in, is Costa Rica. Again, you go back to Austria, United States 15, and you keep jumping on. The South American country that comes in here is Chile. So you see in 20th. Now it's amazing, it's wonderful. I would like you to stop a little, talk about every country on the list. What do you think where the country belongs to, which continent they are in, and this is what my survey would be like. What's the capital of the country, and of course the flags. I would be absolutely thrilled if you can do this one exercise with me. Before they come to here, you ask them to close their books and you have taken a printout of these flags. A color printout preferably, if not at least a black and white. It will be very difficult with some of the flags of the Scandinavian countries, very similar, and you give it to them and you make them find the country. First they talk without seeing the book, and then they see the book and come about it. Then what you say is, go and find a little case study on one or two of these countries as a team. Then you might want to extend it as an assignment where you do one more country as an individual, a case study about it. They could do before, they could do a flipped classroom, so they could do it when they come back to the classes, something that can involve them. One of the things that we found out from this is, where do these happiness quotient comes in? Believe me, one big reason for the countries to be happy is education. So either it could be the schools are very, very democratic, very easy, the fees are very lenient, the travel to school. For example, Finland, which is number 5, is supposed to be the best, number 1 ranked school on PISA rankings. That means the school system in Finland is like the best in the world, and the world is like to copy it and emulate from it. I had friends who traveled down to Finland. I had educators come down to Finland, and we discussed it at length, what makes Finland good. Number 1, students walk to school. Number 2, every school is in the vicinity. Every school is a government-owned school. There is no private schools. They are the quality is like the best school in the world. Number 4, the schools start very, very late. So you don't go to school until age 8 years. Number 5, the schools do not have any kind of assignment or homework. Number 6, the schools have what we call a concept of, the very idea is they do something called passion project. So what you like, you do in the school. So if you like, embroidery, if you like painting, if you like a sport, the school will encourage you and allow you to do that. Wow, amazing. The travel in the country, the crime rate in the country is very low. That's one of the criteria of happy nations. So there are no people burgling you. South Africa, for that matter, is a great country, but South Africa is notoriously famous for burglaries and crime. So that's not a happy country in the world. Employment is happy. It's all related. If the people are employed, they're earning well, then the crime comes less. Lifespan, okay, so while Japan may not be here, the country with the highest lifespan, everyone almost reaches 90 and above 100, but still the quality of life is huge here. Pollution levels are poor. China is one of the most polluted countries, which is why it's not a happy country. India has a lot of stray animals on the road. India has a lot of garbage piling up. That's not a happy country. In fact, United States is guilty of polluting the world, but the country itself is very neat and clean. So you talk about these and what makes it very happy. When you move to H5, one exercise I'd like to do is locate these countries on the map of the world. So, of course, we've just given a random example from one is like for Switzerland, or 2 you can turn over and say, the 2 is Iceland, 3 if you can again find out what the country is, Denmark, and come to it, 14 is Italy. So you can find out these countries. If you can't find any of them, you can email us and let us know. Of course, these are simple flags. What I would like them to do is now make a small chart, a survey chart, and list these countries according to the continent they belong to. And find out, and of course it's very easy to understand, one continent that overwhelmingly has a lot of these countries. In that continent, one region which is called the Scandinavian region, which is where the top 5 countries almost are. Norway, Denmark, Iceland, Finland, Netherlands, Switzerland, Netherlands are just below. What makes these countries so happy? What is so special about Scandinavia? Go ahead and listen to some lectures around it. Find out what makes it special. I've done a series called, Around the World with Softy Safia. You can listen to some of the countries being mentioned in there, and some small talks on that. You can use that. You can go to their own country's website, or you can go to YouTube and play the video. There are these promotional videos, lovely ones. Play, always watch them before you play, so you know what content you're sharing with your students. Very important disclaimer. Those things will make it wonderful exercise. The last one is a case studies. After you've done a survey, after the quiz, after you've done a lot of talking around, is do a comparison between a happy country and a sad country. Now, let's look at number 2 on the happiness index. It's Denmark. What makes Denmark so happy? Why is Denmark such an amazing country to be in? That's one. Then go to the 15th country, and let's say it is Ireland. Ireland is not very far from Denmark, right? So what makes Ireland very, very successful, and what can you do about it? Then perhaps you go to a country which is 55. Maybe your own country if it's not in the list, or a country which India for example, or Bangladesh for example. What makes these countries not very, very happy? Perhaps individually you and I would love to be happy, and that is what will increase the quotient of a country. But then you can talk about things, as we said, same criteria. Schools are very, very competitive. There is a cutthroat competition. Employment is less. Traffics are very bad. Pollution is on a high. And these things actually reduces your lifespan, increases your stress, and removes the happiness part of it. Perhaps a lot of gadgetization has happened in people don't talk to one another. The nuclear families, perhaps most of the countries have it, but they don't meet each other. There are less parks and gardens. There are less excretion, outside sports. So those are the criteria that make people happy. I hope you are happy at the end of the day. Don't feel depressed. Just enjoy and make your kids understand happiness is within you, and it's all of us have the power to be happy. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Candle Blue, and we are on theme I, one of the most important theme in developing skills for any student is public speaking. And yes, one of the things that WHO emphasizes on is effective communication and interpersonal communication. Both of them involve talking to people. So what we do in a public speaking program in the skill is we divide into very small measures, and we give you bit size on how to become a good speaker. So let me take you to the first, just a page activity, which is I1, on how do you improve your voice and how do you have your clarity in speaking. So let's dive down into our first exercise, the voices we hear. Now the idea is, when a public speaker is speaking, the best way for him or her to speak would be to observe and understand how others are speaking. So we've made a collection of 5 different kind of speakers who he or she has to observe. It starts with a commentator. Let's say a football commentator is very different from a cricket commentator, where the luxury of time is there. In football, you may just have to speak about the minutes, you may have to speak about some of the highlights, who gets the ball. But look at the flow. The subject knowledge of a football commentator or a sports commentator has to be immense in terms of what is happening on the field. The voice pitch has to be very, very motivating. It has to go on. It has to be in a flow. It cannot be monotonous. And then what we do is, as I speak about each of them, you will have to make it a class activity. Divide your class into 2 or 3 groups, and when you mention them, tell them, write down a rubric of what these speakers are speaking about. A rubric would be, as I said, the clarity of voice, the voice modulation, the knowledge of the subject, the tone of the voice, the flow of the voice, the knowledge of the area around. And you can divide into as many topics as you want, but they have to distinguish a commentator, say, from an animal trainer. An animal trainer is someone, let's say a horse trainer for that matter, or someone at the circus, where not necessarily now the animals in the circus, but say at SeaWorld. Most of the trainers have to speak in hushed tones. Their voice have to have a lot of calmness into it. An animal can sense fear, an animal can sense apprehension, an animal responds that way. So the voice that we have of an animal trainer is very, very different from that of a commentator. This voice is more like a lullaby, a mother soothing a child. The voice have to, and also they need to know, besides the animal's cues. So the animal gives cues, what the animal sounds like. So you also have a lot of two-way communication, isn't it? A commentator is having no two-way communication. You're only speaking, as I'm doing to you. You're speaking to an audience who is distant from you. You can't even see them. But an animal trainer is seeing a live animal and speaking to them. So immediately from animal trainer, I jump to the last one in your page, the school teacher. Of course, they're two different things, but a school teacher also is speaking to a live audience. The teacher has to be smiling. Your voice modulation have to be moderate. You have to be very energetic. You have to be on your feet perhaps. A commentator is sitting down, animal trainer is on the ground, but a school teacher is handling a group of 10, 15, 30 kids. Animal trainer perhaps is doing just one. Suddenly the change happens. The voice changes. The tone is different. Perhaps a lot of school teachers, when we were doing online courses, had severe problems because they could not see the audience on Skype or on courses like Coursera. So they failed as a teacher online where they were so effective offline. We can do an entire discussion on this. So this may just be one page, but there's so much to discuss about it. Newsreader. How is a newsreader from a commentator? A newsreader has the luxury of what you call a teletranscriptor, where the news is shown on a screen and the screen is between the newsreader and the camera, so the newsreader is able to see it, isn't it? The newsreader also have the luxury of pre-data with them. It's not live like the commentator. It's not live like the school teacher or the animal trainer. It's a pre-data. So they have fed in the data. They know what they're speaking. They have the luxury of commercial break. They can immediately, if something's not working, they can cut it down. Of course, most of the live news is very, very intense as well, but they may have a co-presenter, they may have to do a debate, they may have to engage others. A newsreader will also be a good listener, because if you're doing a newsroom debate, so those would be some of the differences, and that's how the voice would change. Like right now I'm speaking to a subjective audience. I am assuming you're listening to my lecture. You may pause if I'm speaking too fast, and I have a time duration with it. So same thing goes for the newsreader. The fourth or the fifth one, and I'm not going in any order, is an opera singer. Oh, the voice is so different. You can branch on to different kind of singers, but small songs, perhaps like The Reign of Castamere. How do you change your voice? A melody, a rhythm, the orchestra is with you. The voice have to be one of the highest pitches and immediately drop low. Oh, the melody is so different. The opera singer mesmerizes the audience. She is the only one speaking right now and everyone is listening. The voice have to have a clarity, a rhythm, a kind of a music into it, an intonation into it. So much difference between these speakers. So this brings us to the end of a first activity on public speaking, only on observing. I'm sure as a teacher, you will not only speak and make it like a game. On a subplot, you might play a YouTube video of these 5 different kind of things and say, observe what you see. What are the differences you find? And the last thing you can do is you can enact each of them. So there is a fantastic role play. One team becomes a commentator. Of course, I love to hear the opera singers. And if you're doing it in your class, please video shoot it and send it to the Sky team at info@skyeducation.in. We'll love to know you. The second activity is a more simpler one. It is a vocabulary builder. As I said, public speaking is not just about speaking, it's also about knowing good words. The richer your language is, the better your conversation becomes. You become, it's like a choice of words that you have got. Instead of saying many, I could just use a different word. The crowd was different. There was a multitude of people. The hordes had come in. And suddenly you have a lot of time, one thing that you notice in a speaker is they repeatedly use some common words. For example, it could be okay. So after every sentence they say okay, okay, or someone says all right, all right. I had a speaker who conveyed the message. After every time he said, did you get the point? Did you get the point? Did you get the point? At some time the attendees started making fun of it because did you get the point became very, very repetitive. So as you're doing this vocabulary builder, my first advice as a speaker to you, ask everyone to do a 1-minute pitch. It could be any word here. You can use, there's a word that brings out dinner. Just speak about the dinner you had yesterday evening. So last night's dinner, and then see what are the common terms they are repeating it. Are they saying, is there too much of, stopping there, too much of non-thinking? I'm speaking without any script. I just have a book in front of me and I'm sharing the ideas as an author, as a designer of this book, what I need to convey. Do the students have the same kind of clarity when they speak? So that will be the first thing you do in a vocabulary builder. Then of course the whole activity is really fun. You can find words horizontally, vertically, diagonally through the puzzle. You can make it like a TPS, so think, pair and share. Of course, please don't allow them to do it individually. It's really boring. I would love to have it in a group of 2, which is ideal for this kind of word search. 3 is also fine. More than 3 and it becomes chaotic. The first team that comes up with all the answers is fun. You can actually make games like all of you first start with the first B, so there are 4 B letters, or you can just start with the first column there. So from barbecue to light, the lighter to yard, and you can play it like a bingo game, that who can get the word coal first. The word who gets the coal first. I immediately found out the word coal, and you have to do your own figuring out. They can take the markers, they can take color pens, they can do what they like, but it is fun. After you finish the entire game, which will itself take a long time for them to do, and allow them to enjoy that. There will be always smart ones, there will be slow ones. Tell them it's not just the solving of it, it's also fun. You can do 2 side things to it. One is you can find the meaning of the words and let them guess the meanings on their own. So what does barbecue mean? Barbecue is roasting chicken on coal. Fair enough, that's barbecue. Or else you can ask them different opinion and then go to a dictionary and say who was the closest to a dictionary. Sometimes the word meat is difficult to explain. Meat is the raw material inside an animal. Okay, right? Then you can realize the entire thing uses it's like a big barbecue party, or it's like all about food. So this grilling, it's called grilling word search, if they can get the meaning. The last one you can do along with what you did is you can pick up some words and you can ask them to make a sentence around it. Fish, food, I'm sure the word mosquito should be there. There's maybe little spell errors. You can find out if there's a real word like that. But this would be your entire vocabulary builder exercise. The last one is a 2-pager, an I3, where we actually, after having done the observation and the word search, we are asking them to speak now. So what we're saying is very simple: speak about shoes. What is the yardstick to measure the noise level? So while the student is speaking, everyone else is going to observe them. So there are some points there, and you can divide them and make sub points. The students will do peer rating. So just speak on what career choices do you have. So right now my first I3 is about whatever they want to become. So, and let's say a group of 10, you ask each one of them, what do you want to become? A pilot, a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, a scientist, a travel blogger, a teacher, a curriculum designer, an artist, a singer, and allow them the choice. If once somebody says a pilot or a singer, others have to have a different career choice. Then you have to come and speak for a couple of minutes, 2 minutes, on why you chose this career and why is the career so exciting. Give them some pointers, give them some head start, give them some ideas on how do you frame a good speech. As the student is speaking, the others are doing peer review. So once the student finishes, everyone has to say one good thing and one area of improvement. This is a technique, we call it PMI, plus, minus, interesting. So 1 plus, minus, I'm skipping it, but plus, and I say instead of interesting, I'm saying improvement. So just do PI, something they can improve on and something that's good. Always nice to encourage the students, and never nice just to say where they should improve on. Always bring out one area where they were really good at, and this is my I3. Of course, it is much easier to speak, but once you do it, probably if you have 10 students and every student speaks 2 minutes, you're already using 20 minutes of the time. One small caveat is the funny idea that you put a timer there on 2 minutes, and if a student stops at say 1 minute, allow the timer to continue till 2 minutes and say you cannot leave the podium or wherever you're standing until the 2 minutes over. Let them feel a little embarrassed, let them feel a little awkward, let them understand that public speaking is fun if you speak. If you stay silent, we all will be silent. Now, if you think 2 minutes is too long and they're doing for the first time, you can make it into a 90 seconds program. But the idea is make a little awkward situation for them to come and just stay still, right? And sometimes fun also where the ringer is not ringing in. So, the time where you're waiting looks longer than when the time you're speaking. As I speak, I'm almost on the verge of 15 minutes timer that we put it for every activity. I4 is impromptu speaking. Impromptu speaking is also called extempore. So what you're doing is, it's like speaking without preparation. So what we have asked them is, we have taken 4 popular shoe brands and they can speak on selling any one shoe. So it's like a shipwreck game where you pick up, okay, I like the Lacoste shoe, and the Lacoste is the one with the crocodile there, the blue shoes out there, and why do you think these shoes are very good? Maybe you can give a situation, hiking, maybe you can give a situation, party, a situation like graduation, and say which shoes would be fitting and appropriate for which area. So you can, of course you don't have to immediately, they can choose the shoes. This time they can actually nominate a speaker. So if you have a team of 10, I would allow them to make teams of 3 each, maybe 3 and 4 of, and then they can nominate one speaker on the benefit of one shoe, and then others can use. There are some names given of the companies and the shoes. They don't match, doesn't have to. It's just an example of what you can speak about. Perhaps you can take it further and they can speak about their own shoes that they're wearing to the classes. But the idea of the entire exercise is, let the children come up, remove the fear of public speaking, let not be judged, let not be concerned about how good the grammar is or vocabulary is. Tell them we'll build it up in a public speaking program. Hopefully when you see Sky Skills as a dedicated website and app, we'll have only courses on these areas, and our students will become even better as they start speaking publicly, and with confidence, with poise, and with great energy that we see our students have. So this was your entire activity from I1 to I4. Thank you so much. All the best.